So once again, welcome to Oxford Computer Group's latest webinar. This week we're talking about Azure AD B2B. Once again, Chris Lloyd is the presenter, and I've looked through the deck. It's very informative and has some pretty intriguing business approaches here for people to think about. If you could go ahead and advance to the next slide, Chris. Our usual short little advertisement about upcoming courses. We've got our online MIM Foundation training coming up July 10th, 13th, the Privileged Access Management training on July 14th, Azure AD training 17th and 19th. In our next webinar, it's going to be a pretty interesting one with one of our anchor customers, First American Financial, the future of identity governance on July 20th. And if you're looking at this from a governance perspective, absolutely you'll want to attend that one. And looking at some of the people in attendance here, you might really want to take a look at that. Let's go ahead and advance to the next slide. And a little bit of background about OCG before we let Chris do his presentation. We've been doing this for quite a long time, since about 2002, and we've seen all of these changes afoot, particularly in the last couple of years. As we move into the cloud, identity-driven security becomes exceedingly important as a mindset to really get your arms around how to keep your identities and your data secure. We've got a 15-year track record of doing identity. Our specialization here is hybrid identity solutions, both on-prem and in the cloud, and you'll see a good flavor of that today. We've delivered over 700 projects here in the U.S., and just to give you a sense of scale, we've deployed over 7 million Office 365 seats. We typically find ourselves on the podium for various Microsoft Partner of the Year awards and have won 4 times in the last few years. We work very closely with the Microsoft Cloud Engineering team, which is very important. As if you've been working with Azure, you know that the feature set changes on a very, very regular basis, and we stay up to speed on that, and we integrate those new changes in the products into our solutions for our customers. Types of services: planning and assessment, a lot of demand for that. Deployment services, getting these things off the ground, and managed services. Once they're off the ground, taking some of the day-to-day work off your hands for you. That actually can play pretty well in this B2B space too. I want to point out something on this slide that is easy to overlook. It's a little bit hidden by our graphics, but in the bottom left-hand corner, you see the words business confidential. We have deployed Azure Information Protection here internally in order to be compliant with our healthcare customers and other highly regulated customers. We're in a number of highly regulated industries. And one of the ways that we articulate our ability to protect their data is to deploy some of these, all of these Azure security products. This particular one, Azure Information Protection, because we're working with PowerPoint, it causes us to have to classify this document, and if it was customer information, we'd be classifying it as customer confidential. So it's yet another area that we focus on. I don't want to spend any more time on the introduction section, so let's go ahead to the next slide. And Chris Lloyd will take over. Chris has been one of our senior architects for the last several years at Oxford and has quite a few projects under his belt, both with us and prior to coming to Oxford, with quite a number of large enterprise clients. So I'm not going to take any more time with this. I will hand it over to Chris.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Lloyd. I'm an architect with Oxford Computer Group, and I'm just going to jump right into what we have. But right before I do that, just to back up on Steve's point about Azure Information Protection, I did the webinars on those as well. So if you're interested, you can head on over to YouTube. I think they're up there, and you can watch those, and check those out. But as far as B2B, and I'm going to define it as business to business. That's what it actually stands for. We spend far too many times with so many acronyms floating around that nobody ever defines exactly what they are, but business to business accounts. We need to have, you have partners that need access to your resources. We want them to have their own set of credentials. We don't want them using shared accounts. And we also want to lighten the administrative overhead that it gets associated. We don't want to bog down the help desk with calls about users who aren't even the users that we employ at our organization. And so how has this been accomplished in the past? And so some of the implementations that I've either participated in or observed are standing up a separate Active Directory forest and maybe having a limited or no trust to your organizational's employees account forest, maybe standing up Active Directory lightweight directory services or another LDAP directory that you have on premise. There's plenty of third-party products out there that I've seen deployed to manage this as well. And then I've even seen some big no-nos, which is accounts in the same forest as employees. So right off the bat, you may be giving people more access than they really need. Many of these business-to-business accounts need very specific access to a specific application, SharePoint site, and they should not be able to fundamentally walk into your organization and log onto a computer. So there's big downside with doing that one. And then there's the use of Active Directory federated services or some other type of federation product, and that's a completely valid use case for ADFS. However, it is very tedious to set up trust between multiple organizations. So if I'm a business and I have multiple different partners that I need to give access to, setting up each one of those federations with their ADFS. If they don't have ADFS, then we've got to figure something else out. But if they do, it's a big task to continually set those up, and it's a big draw on resources. And then we get to the management pane. And so this management, we're kind of thinking about putting accounts in a directory, whether that directory be the one that your employees are using or another directory. A lot of times that's a manual process. It triggers help desk tickets. Bogging down the help desk, then we're faced with deactivation of accounts. How do we deactivate the accounts? How do we know that the business doesn't need these partners to have access anymore? I already went into too much access it was granted to certain accounts, which leads to increased attack vectors. So we don't trust these partners aren't part of our organization. We trust them enough to give them access, limited access, and we want them to only have that access. But if I've given them too much access, I've increased the attack vectors, and then password resets are really another item that can drive up those help desk tickets. Partners may log into your services maybe once a month, maybe even less than that. So the odds that they're going to remember that one password for your organization is pretty low, and they'll have to do a password reset when they come in. Now, whether that's self-service or they have to initiate a help desk call, depends on how you currently have that set up, if you have anything at all. But what we're here to talk about today is Azure Active Directory business to business. And that's really, we're going to leverage the cloud, Azure Active Directory, which many organizations already have. If you have Office 365, you have Azure Active Directory in the background. And then we're going to use that as the control plane for users to sign up via self-service, or we could put a request process on behalf of, and we'll look at both of those. And to do this, we can use email verified provisioning. So when a user, we put a user in to register for this, we're going to send an email to their email account. And then they can basically accept that invitation and then have access to the resources that you've given them. The self-service portal that we'll look at also has the ability to pre-authenticate users who already have Azure Active Directory or Office 365 accounts, basically giving you that level of assurance that somebody isn't just taking that email address and we're going to sign up and randomly spam different people with invites that they may or may not click on. So it adds that extra level of authentication, telling me that, yes, I know who you are, you have signed in with Azure Active Directory, and now you can request access. So what we're getting with this, we're getting partners managing their own credentials, and this is key. So if they already have Azure Active Directory, we're really just making a reference in your Azure Active Directory to the object that's in their organization's Azure Active Directory, meaning their password is the same password they're using to sign in with their current organization. Also means that when that organization gets rid of that employee or terminates them, or they have a separation, that account, that access is now gone because they are going to delete and disable that account, meaning they will not have access into your Azure Active Directory or any other resources that user has access to. That's a big one. You can obviously always control who has access into your Azure Active Directory, so you can control that user's access as well. You don't have to rely on that organization to disable that account. You can also control group membership, the custom attributes that get assigned to those users. Group membership's a big one because that's, if you're familiar with the Azure portal, that's how we assign applications. So if you're familiar with the My Access portal, we have the ability to publish different applications in that portal, and the publishment of those applications as well as the claims that we then send to those applications are typically controlled by group memberships. The different ways, when this product first came out, the only way to invite users was to do a CSV upload or do them one at a time, and it wasn't really ready for prime time, and that's just not a feasible option for users to onboard B2B options. The CSV was very complicated. Not only did it need the email address of the person, we needed to actually go into the portal and capture object IDs and different things to give them the access that they needed in there. It wasn't very intuitive at all. So what we now have, and what I'll demo today, is we're going to show off a self-service portal that end users from those businesses can come and sign up for your directory, or we can talk about how to integrate this with MIM or maybe some other identity management platform. So here's what the invitation and acceptance looks like. So the user will get an email, and this email is customizable. Your branding will apply here, as well as your organization's name, but it's going to give them some details about what they signed up for, and then they can click the Get Started link, which will send them back to the My Access portal, which will give them the access to the applications they wanted. As far as signing up for the Azure AD B2B, it's the same as validating my email address. So we're actually going to validate that user owns that email address by sending them an email, and then they will accept that email. So behind the scenes, and this is the Azure Active Directory, this is the new portal. The old one is fastly becoming out of fashion. So this is the new portal. This is what they look like before the invitation. You'll see that the source is an invited user, and then the source changes depending upon what type of an account the user has. So if I were to send to an Azure Active Directory account or an invitation, a user from an Azure Active Directory tenant, isn't going to say a Microsoft account, it'll say an Azure Active Directory account. The Microsoft account is if I have somebody signing up with a actual Microsoft security account, like in a Hotmail or Outlook.com account, or if they were to sign up with a public email address, like a Gmail or a Comcast or something like that, then they would actually be forced to make a Microsoft account if they didn't already have one. I talked about the application access panel, and this is what it looks like. This is the launch pad for users to access their applications. This is a highly desirable item for many organizations, because users can come here, they can see exactly what applications they have access to, and then launch those applications from this panel. It works on mobile, works on obviously any browser that you have. And that's a very nice way to do it. You can also challenge MFA per application from this portal. So you can say, if I wanted to go into, we'll say OneDrive, we could put MFA, depending on where the user is, in conditional access, which we've talked about in past webinars, but we can trigger that on here. And the same thing applies to B2B users. We can force them to use MFA on different applications if we want to do that. So the different types of accounts that can exist in Azure Active Directory can either be a member or a guest. Typically, you will probably want to use guest accounts versus member. Members are kind of what your employees and people that you have existing in your organization today, and that's their type of access. A guest has very limited access into the directory, and that's typically what we see when we do Azure B2B. There are some limited use cases for making B2B accounts full members of a directory, but that's very limited. So how to manage business-to-business identities. So the admin can add them ad hoc, so individually through the portal. We talked about the CSV upload, which still exists, and then there's really the new invitation API. It's an API we can leverage to actively send invitations through Azure, and we can integrate this, almost with anything. And so what I've initiated here is a self-service portal or integration with FIM/MIM, or insert any identity management platform you want there. But being a Microsoft partner, we're going to say FIM or MIM. The self-service portal, and the one I'm going to show off here, is one that was actually released by Microsoft on GitHub. They just mocked up a portal. It's actually pretty good on its own, and that's what we'll be using to demonstrate this. But fundamentally, you could make any portal you wanted to. The API is accessible, and all the documentation required. This is a very easy one to stand up, though. It is a ASP.NET MVC app, and it's using DocumentDB, or what I believe they're calling now Cosmos DB, on the back end. It has the ability to do approvals. So when a user requests access, you can not allow them in there immediately. You can have an approval. You can have pre-approved domains, where if a user signs up, they have to be in a domain. So if we take oxfordcomputergroup.com, which is our domain, if I'm in that domain, I will immediately get access without needing an approval. And we'll look at how we can control that, so that can't just be anybody going to sign up with oxfordcomputergroup.com and boom, they're in. We can require sign-in to Azure AD before the user signs up, and then we can set up default groups per the domain. When we say domain, I'm talking about the actual email, the email suffix that we've specified here, so that when a user signs up from oxfordcomputergroup.com, they're going to get access to the IT support group. They're going to be put into the sales group, or whatever groups that you want to specify when they sign up. And I think this is demo time. So I'm going to minimize that and make sure I got the right web browser. So this is the actual portal, and I'm going to take you through the end user side, and then we'll look at the admin side previously. Again, I said this is on GitHub. It actually has a click to deploy to Azure button, so it's actually very simple to deploy. And we'll take a look at some of the underpinning, a few of the underpinnings after I go through the demonstration here. So I have set it up so that I require Azure Authentication for oxfordcomputergroup.com. So when I type in my email address here and then hit tab, or if I click to another field as a user would as they are going to fill out this form, it's going to take me to an Azure AD authentication page. And this is, for my organization, it's going to take it depending on obviously whatever the suffix is there, and then I'm authenticated. So I've authenticated to this app, meaning, and if you're thinking about this, meaning I have some multi-tenant stuff set up on the back end to actually support that, because I have to be able to go and let other users from other Azure Active Directories authenticate into my app. You also notice that it actually went out to my profile from my Oxford Computer Group Azure Active Directory object and pulled in my name. So it gave me my first, last name. It's already there. I could put a comment there. Again, this is a very bare bones form here. I could, request multiple different attributes there at the time. The pre-authenticated checkbox is there because I have done that, and then I'll request access. That'll process on the back end, and then once that's done, I'll actually get an email. I'm going to let that process. Come on. This is what happens when you host these on the free versions of the app services. There we go. So I got a notification that I was auto approved. So I would get an email that's like this. I could click the Get Started link. That would take me over to the My Apps portal, and I've signed up. So actively looking at the back end of this, so I've signed in with an administrator of this tenant, and they would take, it's using the roles in Azure Active Directory. So it's actually the two roles that actually have access for this this portal are global administrators, and then anybody who has the guest inviter role. And once you sign in and authenticate into the admin side, it takes you right into the pending guest requests. And this would be anybody, you would see items down here if they needed approval. My request didn't come here because I auto approved it based on the domain. So let's look at actually how those domains are set up. So you can have multiple pre-approved domains in here. If I look at this one, which is for Oxford Computer Group, I want to make this bigger so everything kind of fills in. You can see that it'll actually go out and verify that domain is in Azure Active Directory. You can set it to not auto approve by unchecking that box. Specify the member type within the directory. There's an email template that you can select, and that really dictates the text in this email message here. And then the groups, and so these are all the groups in my directory, and I've selected SG Finance there for anybody with Oxford Computer Group, and that assigns them into there. And there's some additional items at the bottom. So, where does it redirect to? What's the inviter's email address, which is basically just some information for the end user to see. And then requiring sign-in. So requiring sign-in means it's exactly what happened to me when I signed up. I put in my email address, I hit down to the next box, and it redirected me to sign in to my Azure Active Directory. Also from the admin side, we have the ability to do mail templates here. And this is exactly what it says, make a mail template. There are some variables in here that you can use that are basically referencing items either within the portal or items, actually it's all within the portal. I was about to say it's not referencing things in your Azure Active Directory. It's items that you would have set up during the site configuration section about how the site is named, the inviting organization, all those things. If you wanted a terms of service side, terms of service document, you could include that as well. So quite a bit of functionality out of something that Microsoft really mocked up. And so, what we can do is we can actually take this as an underpinning, and we have, and I've done it at a couple clients now, where we've taken this as a a shell and deployed it in their organization, customize it, we give it some nice branding, remove some things, change a little bit of some stuff around, and they can fundamentally, they're using it today to have other organizations be able to sign up. Now they usually, so if we're going to talk about what are some best practices here, is really working on these pre-approved domains. I typically don't allow, it would suggest starting off with pre-approved domains. Now, if you wanted to auto-approve, that's up to you, but starting off with people that need access, rather than just having that portal out there and anybody can sign up for it, make it very targeted as to what domains are you going to accept, what domains are approved for use. On the back end of this, so I actually have that website hosted in one Azure tenant, not this Azure tenant, and then I have made application registrations inside of this organization's Azure Active Directory, and I had to have two. There is the B2B admin app, which is allowing the authentication to the application for administrators. And then there is the pre-authentication app. The pre-authentication app is really the nuts and bolts of how it was able to ask me to sign in as my Chris Lloyd at oxfordcomputergroup.com, and then be a multi-tenant application and be able to authenticate against my Oxford Azure Active Directory. And it's really very simple. I mean, it sounds much more complicated than it is, but Microsoft's made this very simple. It's really just a multi-tenant application. I have had to make a slight change in the OAuth settings in the manifest here to allow the implicit flow. Microsoft defaults that to false when you do make a registered app. So I have had to allow implicit flow on OAuth. But once I had all those set up, and there's a good guide on GitHub to walk you all through this, and it details everything that I've talked about here and more, because there are permissions that are required to set this up as far as the application, and really it's Microsoft Graph permissions. All this is backboned on the Microsoft Graph. So once you have all that set up, I want to show that I actually did get added to this directory, so just to prove that it really does work. So there I am. There's my account in the directory now. If I look at the profile, you'll see that I am a guest. The source was an invited user. I actually haven't claimed the invite yet because that's not a really fun process to demo. It's just kind of boring. And so I'm a guest. These are all my different things. I was put into the SG Finance group, like our pre-approved domain said, and that group is actually giving me access to two applications within Azure. I now have access to Box and LinkedIn. I know those don't really make sense, but that's what we have set up in this trial. It doesn't make sense that I would give access. I mean, Box maybe, but LinkedIn is kind of weird, at least for a partner organization to have access to. So that kind of encompasses really this portal. It's really about Microsoft has done a really nice job of this portal with the approvals, with the pre-approved domains. It's actually really good. The only couple of tweaks that we typically add to this are on the approvals. When a user requests access, it's not a pre-approved domain. The approval just goes here. There's no email notification done in that. So in our implementations, we've had to add some code to it to allow it to do an SMTP message to send out to whoever, a group of a distribution group, to let them know there's an approval waiting and they need to go approve it or reject it. All right, back to my slides. Oh, it did this to me before. There we go. So we looked at the self-service portal, and that's great for individual users signing up for themselves. You may have scenarios where that is totally applicable, and then you may have other scenarios where you'd rather have it, the responsibility end up on the employee side, so the internal side. So I'm requesting access on behalf of such and such. And this is where we could use MIM or FIM to leverage the portal, the end user portal, to have a user go in there, request access for somebody, use a workflow to call out to the Azure AD B2B API that's a lot of letters to say out of your mouth. And to call out to that API, initiate the invitation, and then the user can access those resources, that Azure Active Directory. But on what we do after that is up to us. Now we've got MIM involved. We've initiated the API. We could also, and we've done this, is to make a management agent that is actually going to then connect to Azure Active Directory and only connect to those B2B objects. And so we can manage them. We can put governance around them. We can say after 60 days we need to send down an approval to the person who requested that account, saying, do you still need this account? If yes, we'll extend it for another 60 days. If no, if you click decline, we will delete that account. And so really putting governance around those B2B accounts is when we could really leverage MIM and FIM. And if we had the self-service portal and we had users requesting access that way, we could also leverage our management agent to pull those objects in as well and really manage the B2B objects with your existing identity management solution. And so it's really it's kind of a rough diagram of how that would work. We have a user requesting on behalf of an external identity. They're going through the MIM service and portal, and there's a workflow that'll kick off that'll initiate the request. The user would get the invite, they'd claim it. In the background, in the meantime, we've got the sync engine which is running, which is polling Azure Active Directory, sees the new Azure AD B2B account, pulls it in, and we would project it into the metaverse. We wouldn't be able to project provision to on-premise Active Directory because it's really that kind of linkage doesn't really exist. So we would probably put it in a different object type that we weren't going to project into or maybe with the same object type, but we wouldn't provision it out to Active Directory. But in the MIM service and portal, we could ensure that it's in the right groups, adding group memberships to it if we needed to, really constructing the whole life cycle of a Azure B2B account within this system. You don't have to use this. You could use the portal may fit, this self-service portal may fit your needs. This is just going to add on the ability to do some high-level governance if you have quite a few B2B accounts.
So there's a question about that. So is there the ability to show logs in provisioning and deprovisioning these partner accounts?
So the self-service portal has it's all stored in its document DB, so extracting it out of there is possible. Writing out a logging component to this definitely would be advisable rather than going to pull it out of document DB, but everything is stored in that document DB, so however you want to extract it is up to you. If we do it in MIM, we obviously have reporting options available to us.
Great.
So as far as using SAML, so there's a question here about using SAML. And so once the account is in Azure Active Directory and we have the objects within that, and we've given them access to applications. Those applications, the panel that I showed with all those different applications, they can be SAML-based apps, meaning we can use Azure Active Directory as the identity provider, federate with something like Salesforce, and then allow those users to get access that way. As far as provisioning is concerned, there's many different ways SaaS applications do provisioning. One of them is if you have a new SAML request come across, we can provision the end user. And then other applications are using SCIM, like a Salesforce would be an example. So if I had a B2B account within Azure Active Directory and they had access to Salesforce, then that provisioning action that's happening in the background in Azure Active Directory to provision that B2B user to Salesforce would in fact take place and provision that account. So I think there is a poll. We would, if you guys wouldn't mind, we have a poll, which is, would you like to have Azure AD B2B demoed to you on a one-to-one scenario, or one-to-many, however many people you wanted to invite to it. And so we're looking to see, how many people would be interested in that. I appreciate everybody taking the time to answer. It's a pretty strong yes, so that's good. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. And then that really finishes up my webinar. I appreciate everybody for taking the time to join. And do you have anything else to say, Steve?
I don't see any other questions in the question window, but we do have a little bit more time. So if you've got any questions, now is the time to get them in.
Oh, I did have one thing. So there is licensing. Azure AD B2B is included with Azure AD Premium licenses. So for every one Azure AD Premium license, which is included in the Enterprise Mobility Suite, for every one of those licenses, you get 5 licenses for Azure B2B accounts.
Okay. We've got oh, you're seeing the questions. Great.
Yeah. So yes, we can share the slides with you. The management agent for Azure B2B, it's not available for Microsoft. It would be, it's a custom one from Oxford, and so it's a management agent that we've written. So MFA can be used for B2B accounts via on those individual applications. So those individual applications could have certain criteria, whether or not they are inside or outside the network, and actually using conditional access to trigger MFA challenges. Is it freely available? Well, so the B2B stuff is included with Azure AD Premium, so that's not freely available. The portal that I showed is freely available on GitHub. I don't have the link on hand, but if you search for Azure AD B2B and self-service portal, that'll get you in the right neighborhood. Ooh, do I see B2B eventually replacing ADFS? I like ADFS. I don't think it'll replace ADF. Well, it might. So I see a lot of we do a lot of work moving different relying parties out of ADFS into Azure AD. I actually am at a client now where we've moved 60 to 70 applications off ADFS and into Azure AD, and so I technically can see an end to it in the future. So I can see that scenario playing out, but I'm not going to call it.
Hedging your bets.
Yes.
And we've got another question coming in.
Let's see, does Azure Authenticator work as MFA for B2B? Can B2B users register without ever setting a password, just Authenticator straight up? I do not believe they can just use Authenticator, but they can use the MFA Authenticator app.
Okay. What about that one question we were asking earlier about those 4 B2B connections available for every Azure AD client that you have? What happens if you go beyond that?
Say that again, sorry.
So there's that 4-to-1 ratio. You can have 4 B2B connections for every Azure AD Premium account that you've licensed. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, that is a correct statement.
And then if we go beyond that?
So if you want to go beyond that, we have a current question out to Microsoft for that very question, and we have not gotten a response yet. So we're kind of waiting on a response for that answer. Yeah, so I don't have an answer for you, but we have asked the product group and the sales team, and we're waiting for their response.
Okay. And you've got another question. If an application is ADFS ready, does that mean by default it will be B2B ready?
So ADFS is really using your on-premise identities, and in the Azure B2B space, we're talking about using cloud identities. So The application itself would have to be lifted for the IDP to change away from ADFS to Azure AD as the IDP. And that's the way that a lot of places are taking it. So in the ADFS space, what we're seeing is a lot of clients are keeping ADFS. They have ADFS just integrated with Office 365 or Azure AD, however you want to use it, and then everything else, every other application that they onboard or they currently had an ADFS, they've moved into Azure AD as the IDP, because with Azure AD, if it's either in the gallery, we can do that. If we could add custom apps for and use just SAML, customizing the different attributes that we send back and forth. And so in that way, employees or people in the organization authenticate into Office 365, and that in turn allows them to access the applications that are then federated with Azure AD. The B2B users, we're asking them to sign into Azure AD with their current credentials from their organization or from their Microsoft account, and then the federation of Azure AD between you and that application would then take place.
All right. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in the door, so I guess it's time to wrap this one up. Thanks everyone for attending, and if you marked yes for the B2B demo, we'll be getting back in touch with you. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday.